Now, of course, South Africa have a hostage situation in Yemen, but our government's stance is that we don't negotiate with terrorists, and that's that. Is President Goodluck Jonathan's similar?
Look, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily been that, because they have negotiated with terrorists in the past. And I think one has to consider the wider Nigerian context, as well as the historical context of Nigeria, which is a country that has essentially been characterized over the last many decades by instability and insecurity. We're talking about a country that suffered military coups. We're talking about people who are often economically marginalized, despite the fact that this is a country that has the largest oil reserves in Africa, has been extracting oil for a number of decades, and yet this is not translated into tangible socioeconomic development, particularly in the regions also where oil is extracted. So you tend to have these kind of economic heartland, in Abuja and Lagos, with this economic marginalization that takes place, and you can hark back to the history that explains some of this in greater detail. But to an extent, the North has had the short end of the stick in terms of how resources, and not just financial resources, but political goods have been distributed. So you've got the sense of marginalization, you've got extreme poverty, you've got high levels of youth unemployment, and this creates the conditions where people don't see themselves as having legitimate forms of political expression, and so grievances and the like are expressed through violence, and the history has often been that the military responds with violence. So I think the way that this is playing out is very much what has happened in the past. It's it's more of the same. So I don't think that it's necessarily just about not negotiating with terrorists. One has to look at kind of consider the wider context and see that instability in Nigeria, terrorism in Nigeria, while this is obviously a wider problem in Africa, is very much linked to the socioeconomic conditions of the country, and that I think it's likely we'll continue to see these kinds of forms of instability presenting a problem to Nigeria, as long as political goods are not being delivered by the state. There are high levels of corruption to the extent that local citizens might not consider the state to be legitimately distributing resources as it should. And of course, the number one political good that a state should deliver is security, and it's not able to do that. So I think those are some of the broader issues that feed into it. And ultimately, I think what's happening in Nigeria is that the government is having to consider, does it change tack? How does it go forward in dealing with Boko Haram? Because you'll remember that in May last year, the state of emergency was declared. So in essence, the Nigerian government has been waging a war against Boko Haram for the last year, and has at best presented muted results. And now suddenly it's got this international spotlight on it, and it has to be very cautious in how it considers going forward. I think it's had, as I mentioned, a very hard approach on the one hand with military intervention and how it's dealt with insurgents when it has encountered them and captured them. But on the other hand, it's also had a policy in the past, as you might know, with the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, in the Niger Delta, where it had offered an amnesty. So groups were able to surrender their weapons and were not prosecuted for any crimes that they might have committed. So you've got these two kind of a soft approach along with a hard approach, but it's not producing results. So I think there's probably some serious consideration as to how they go forward, particularly because of the media attention this is receiving.